we help you create a standardization and an education tool. So every time you hire a new person, they know exactly what to do in your practice. Doesn't matter where it is or who it is. They know exactly what you own and what your policies are. So training is reduced when you're hiring a lot of people. You standardize your approach across multiple organizations so you feel like a leaner, meaner operation. And our whole goal is, how do you disrupt the equipment management maintenance cycle so not everything is retroactive, it's proactive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Raving Patients podcast, sponsored by Pair Dental and Cloud Dentistry. Today is a different episode. If you're watching it, you'll see there we have 3 people on, which is a very rare occurrence for me, but it's a very different type of podcast. As you know, Jeremy Krell was recently on one of my episodes, and he runs Revere Partners, and I decided to have a podcast called Startup Central, where we're talking to 3 companies about what they do for the dental industry. So I'm introducing them to people in the dental industry. So on today's podcast is Alice from Sleep Architects, Jinesh from UptimeHealth, and Michael from VERENA Solutions. Thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it. We're going to start by having each of the guests introduce themselves, who they are, and what they do. So Alice, we'll start with you and we'll round robin through. So Alice, what do you do? How do you help dentists?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm Alice Limkakeng, CEO of Sleep Architects, and our company is revolutionizing the care of obstructive sleep apnea, working with dentists to do that.
Perfect. Michael, you're next.
Thank you. My name is Mike Infranger with VERENA Solutions. We are reinventing the way that safety is bought and supplied to the dental office.
And Jinesh?
I'm Jinesh, CEO and co-founder of UptimeHealth, and we help dental practices understand what they own in their buildings and how to take care of it from a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly standpoint to keep it from breaking down.
So three very different companies, all helping the dental industry. I'm going to start with some questions, and again, we'll round robin the questions through the guests, and we'll get their answers here. So the first question, guys, and Jinesh, we'll start with you on this one, is startups are formed because entrepreneurs realize there's a big opportunity or an unaddressed pain point that others haven't thought about. What was this realization for you and your company?
That's a good question. It all started when I worked at the large health systems, and I managed all of their medical equipment across 13 large hospitals with hundreds of beds. And I realized I had a whole department, a giant budget, a team of technicians all in-house to do all this work. And I looked across the street one day and I saw these urgent cares getting popped up and a dental clinic right next to it in the plaza. And I just thought, well, they have medical equipment too. They don't have experts on site. How do they know what to do to keep things from breaking down, keeping uptime as high as possible? And I walked across the street, knocked on their door, asked them these questions. They didn't have a good answer. And that was one of the reasons I saw the opportunity. Then the trends of more urgent cares and dental practice getting built overnight, realized that we could get a headwind in this market and hopefully help a lot of people out that way.
And just to be clear, I know you gave a very brief little introduction about what you do. Can you go into just a little bit more specifics? Because although that was a great little short elevator speech, I want to make sure companies know, dentists listening know what you actually do.
Yeah. So what happens is we first come to your practice. We let you know exactly what you own, make, model, category, everything about that device. We then let you know what are the best practice daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly thing you should be doing to that device at the clinic level. If that's checking oil levels on your compressor or doing your spore samples with your sterilizer. And then if something breaks, we actually help you dispatch your technician. Doesn't matter who you use, we integrate with them. And we then track how often things are breaking down, how much it's costing, are you doing these quality control things internally, and predict when you might have a future breakdown or replacement event so you can get ahead of problematic equipment.
Perfect. That's a much better example. So now someone listening will kind of understand what you do. We'll come back to you in a few minutes with another question. So, Michael, same thing with you. They're formed when entrepreneurs realize there's a big opportunity or unaddressed pain points that others haven't thought about. What was this realization for you and your company?
The pandemic. So we were already designing and developing. We're a product development company at heart. We already had a couple of products, the flagship product being a safety needle called the Safe Cap. But when the pandemic hit, my wife actually owns her own dental office. And so getting supplies became a nightmare. It became nearly impossible. And so it was very personal for me, my wife being safe, my kids being safe. I've got 3 kids now. And so I scrambled and I said, okay, we got to figure out how to get her stuff. Once we started running around, we already have a lot of contacts overseas. The idea was just to get her things that she could use. And we have a lot of affiliate companies. We said, well, we'll supply some of them as well. Our goal is never really to be a PPE supplier. But what we found is that there's a big supply chain issue not just in delivery, but also in how things are purchased. So we went and reinvented the way that a distributor would buy and sell all these safety items to the end user. So we created a software interface for any dental office, big or small, multi-office or single, so they can set their levels, and they enter into a subscription service, and all the items are delivered once a month, everything they need, typically at a lower price because we buy on allocation. We go to our vendors and we say, we're going to buy 6 months ahead of time because we know what our customers are going to use. Typical distributors are going to buy based on what they used in the past. We can predict the future. So we get lower pricing, and we ship things automatically so people have what they need when they need it. There's no guesswork involved.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for that, Michael. So Alice, your turn. So I got to give Alice a lot of credit. Alice was the one who helped create some of these questions, which I think are awesome. So thank you, Alice. But the same question for you. Startups are formed because entrepreneurs realize there's a big opportunity or unaddressed pain point that others haven't thought about yet. What was this realization for you and your company?
Yeah, thanks. So my background is in venture capital investing, actually. I spent a good part of my career, building new companies and help bring new technologies to market in the healthcare medical world. And so through that work, I knew about obstructive sleep apnea, this disease state. It's huge. It's systemic in its effects. I think as a community, we're learning about the systemic effects of lack of sleep. And I also knew that CPAP, which is the mask that people wear on their face that forces air down the throat to splint the airway open, which was a traditional therapy for these millions of patients, was not working for many patients. A lot of patients can't tolerate it. There's a stigma to it. Has a lot of side effects and uncomfortable. So when I learned that dentists could treat patients for obstructive sleep apnea with oral appliances, which are highly engineered mouthguard type of devices that sit in your mouth at night and keep the airway open, I thought, why aren't these things flying off the shelves? They're comfortable, they're convenient, they're effective. And then as I did more research, I found out that it's really all this pre-treatment workflow that dentists have trouble with. So they need to work with the medical side to get the patient diagnosed. There's medical insurance. There's some connecting the dots and educating patients. And I thought from my business side that those are all solvable problems. So I jumped in to create a platform, which is now a complete end-to-end digital platform to work on behalf of dentists and with dental practices to move patients through that pre-treatment workflow, connect in collaboration with medical sleep doctors, with the dentist to co-treat, and basically enable the dental practice to focus on the clinical part of truly just treating patients without all of the other aspects that they've had obstacles with before.
Perfect. That was really good answer. Thank you for sharing that information. So let's go to question number 2 now. And even though Alice just spoke, it's just going to be easier to have Alice start on this one. Alice, knowing dentists are interested in growing their practices, especially coming out of a pandemic, how would your company help a practice in this growth effort?
Yeah, so I think treating sleep patients for dental practices is probably one of the easiest latent areas of potential growth that's already sitting in their practice. So patients coming in to the practice, about 20%, we know epidemiologically, about 20% of the general population have sleep problems and could potentially be treated. So that's, hundreds of patients who are already coming in and out of the practice who likely need to be treated. There is actually a huge recall going on with CPAP right now, unfortunately, where they're recommending oral appliances as an alternative for these patients who are already diagnosed. So a lot of latent, I think, opportunity already sitting in the practice. And we have helped and do help practices kind of tap into that and start up a new therapy line, which would bring that type of growth to rejuvenate a lot of practices that have had, trouble and now see the opportunity coming out of the pandemic.
Well, what I find interesting is I know there's a lot of dentists, and look, so everybody knows, and you guys, I don't even know if I discussed this with you in our introductory call, but the listeners certainly know. I am exiting clinical dentistry in another year and a half. The last 5 or 6 years, I've been just a restorative dentist. I haven't done any type of surgical stuff at all. Don't do any root canals. I know there's dentists out there that actually they stop doing all restorative dentistry, all types of, and they focus on just sleep dentistry because it's such a need in the industry, and so few practices focus on it. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for practices that want to grow, that they now have another opportunity that Alice's company can afford them.
Yeah. And to that point, it's actually very less physically taxing on a practitioner. So we've had practitioners who are, thinking about that and wanting to do services that are less physically taxing. So that's also a benefit.
Perfect. So, Michael, now it's your turn. How would your company help a practice in growth efforts after the pandemic?
Real quick, Alice, my wife is getting into that in a big way, and her practice is really shifting over, doing a lot of that for all the reasons you said. So I wanted to second that. But yeah, so I guess there's two main ways. First off, because of how we buy, our prices tend to be a lot lower than traditional distribution and even one-off resellers or Amazon, primarily because of the big discounts we get, and our overhead isn't very high relative to the competitors. Two, we simplify and in many ways remove the job completely of buying this stuff for a practice. The kinds of things that we sell are not things that people want to buy. It's masks, gloves, sleeves, protective gear. It's things that are just a cost. They don't really make your job better. And every time you look at your invoices, you're like, again, I got to buy this stuff. So we lower those prices, and we, for the most part, for many offices, it's a set it and forget it kind of deal where things just show up on a regular basis. Now, we have a piece of software coming out pretty soon that's going to be an upgrade to that, where an office, and this is going to work well for big groups, the office manager can go and set their inventory threshold. And once a week, they'll go in and they'll set where they're at currently. When it gets below the threshold, an order is automatically placed. So they're never having to worry about over-ordering or under-ordering. They're always going to order just the amount they need given their usage. And it increases cash flow for the office, which, again, for a big group can become a really big deal, especially as these groups start to grow.
Well, I know as a former owner of a practice how difficult inventory management was. So especially if you have what I liked you just said is that, hey, it only orders the amount you want, because there are times that they put an order in and they get 20 times what they ordered because they put the wrong amount in. They thought they were ordering one, but they ordered 20 of them. So that's certainly a positive effect from a business owner's perspective, helping control the overhead, lower their cost, obviously then be able to make more money. So I'm all for that.
Glad we can help.
So, all right, Jinesh, on to you now. So how would your company be able to help a practice in a growth effort, especially after a pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think growth is looked at in different ways depending on who you are. So growth could be increasing existing revenue for one practice. It could be buying multiple practices. So it all depends on where you stand. If it's trying to increase revenue from your existing practice, one thing that we help them do is first ensure their equipment's not going to fail them. Because every time an equipment's down, you're not going to collect service revenue for treating a patient on that device. Or you might have to triage them somewhere else and maybe lose a future patient too. So that's one thing, is we want to make sure at least disruptions from an operational standpoint are there. But if you're then trying to grow and acquire new practices as well, since our product basically standardizes how you think about equipment management, we help you create a standardization and an education tool. So every time you hire a new person, they know exactly what to do in your practice. Doesn't matter where it is or who it is. They know exactly what you own and what your policies are. So training is reduced when you're hiring a lot of people. You standardize your approach across multiple organizations so you feel like a leaner, meaner operation. And our whole goal is, how do you disrupt the equipment management maintenance cycle so not everything is retroactive, it's proactive.
So I have a follow-up question to that when it comes to you. And we talked offline, just like I talked to the other two people as well. And you mentioned that, and I think you said it during the recording as well, that you have maintenance schedules that you provide to the office. So, one of the things, again, being the owner, I was on my team to use proper maintenance in these things. But how many times they got busy and forgot? I'm assuming your product is consistently reminding them that they have to do these certain tasks, whether it's weekly, some of them are daily, weekly, monthly. Is that exactly what it does?
That's exactly what it does. So what it does is it not only reminds them every morning, they can turn off those email reminders if they use the tool to log in just because it's second nature, which happens. And then it lets you know when somebody's forgotten it. So the very next morning, that practice owner, whoever's managing that practice, can actually see all the items that were missed. So that could be the first thing they take care of whenever they walk in the door the next day. So even if there is something that was missed, it's not something that you catch months later. It is as real time as possible.
And I guess that they sometimes become second nature because they can condition to do it because they have a schedule they have to stick by.
Exactly. It's just a digital way to track things that are probably paper-based. And we all know with that, you get some better data reporting alerts. And that's exactly it.
So it's a little similar, so I'm trying to lose some weight and I track my meals and I use an app called Noom, and if I forget to log my meal, Noom reminds me, hey, you got to log your meal. So it sounds like it's something similar to that as well. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Good analogy there. All right. Jinesh, this next question's for you. So, and this was something I'm going to surprise you guys with. A lot of your companies were forming or in development during the pandemic. And I know that dental startups started right before pandemics. And I mean, offices were opening up and then they shut down. I know someone who bought their office on February 15th, and a month later after buying their office, the world shut down. So can you talk to, because I have a lot of startup practices. Can you talk to the fact? That was my wife, by the way.
That was my wife did that for her father's practice in January and February. So just interjecting.
No, that's great. That's what I want. I want you to interject when you want to. But talk to. I know how stressful it was for dental owners when they bought a practice and then they shut down the next week. And I was in practice for 14 years and I was stressed out. So can you talk about, just from a business perspective, how you dealt with issues during the pandemic when you were just a startup practice at that point, a startup business at that point?
Yeah, I think it was tough. Similar story. We launched our product to a more than MVP stage, so something that was ready for the market right around December and January. And we grew January, we doubled. February, we doubled again in March. And because of that, as a startup, you proactively hire and buy things, expecting scale. And we did just that. We geared up. We hired more salespeople. We hired more ops people. We put a lot more into development. And then overnight, the market goes away. And just like the doctors, their dental offices shut down. And it forced us to evaluate, one, how long is this thing going to last? Do we ramp down and then ramp back up? Because we all know training people takes time, money, energy. And is it worth, the 2-month ramp up, the 2-month down ramp for that 4 months? If this thing is only a 1-month, 2-month thing, which we all didn't know, it doesn't make sense for me to let go of people. And I don't want to either. So I was thinking everything not to. So I kept prolonging the business things that I had to do just because I wasn't sure what the outcome would be. And it was a really tough time. We had to rescale our things. We focused a lot on the clients that we already had on our platform. And we just went hand in hand with them saying, what's the top of mind right now? And it was always COVID. Well, then what can we do to make that process better? And that's where we actually invented that reminder, this daily, weekly, monthly reminder thing, because we saw the turnover was starting to get high, or people were going out sick and they needed to train a whole new, on-demand person that was just there for the day on how to do their things. And it actually helped us focus a lot on listening to our clients, because we weren't trying to get new sales. It was almost impossible at the time. It was, how do we make the life better for the people we have? And we know it's going to benefit our ecosystem. So that's how we changed.
That's great. Now, Mike, in your case, I think a lot of your business was dealing with PPE, which was needed during the pandemic anyway. So why don't you talk about, how the pandemic affected your business in that sense?
Well, we had, as you imagine, kind of a burst of sales, although, getting product was a mess. So even though we had these contacts overseas and we knew where to get it from, shipping was crazy and those prices were skyrocketing. And, and so then the price of the PPE went up a lot. Obviously that, pissed off a lot of clients, but we found kind of going between different groups, we were able to make sure we got product. And we found that the biggest thing that our clients were frustrated by, prices obviously were very frustrating, but just getting things on a regular basis when they needed them became really the mission critical issue. And so we really focused on that. We said, okay, well, we'll make sure that we've got relationships in place to make sure we can get these things. We realized the best way to do this was subscription. Part of it was that we were already making and selling safety devices. We already did that stuff. So 3 years before our business had started, we were already a safety device manufacturer. And we realized the best way for our clients to make sure they got what they needed was to be predictive. And so we developed two things. One was to help them figure out what their throughput was, because most offices don't know what they use per month. I don't know about your office, but many one-off offices, my wife's included, really didn't know how many gloves, masks, sleeves, bibs they used per month. They just knew when they were out of them. And so we developed an algorithm to help them figure out, okay, based on your throughput, you're probably using X, Y, and Z amount of these things. So that's how we set the levels. And then through our modified method of buying, because we're a subscription, we're able to go, okay, not only do we know what they're going to buy, we know it's the right amount, and we make sure we can have this stuff allocated to us 6 months ahead of time. So regardless of a container being stuck in the Suez Canal or things backed up in Oakland, we knew that we were buying way ahead of time. So we weren't worrying about, things being shortchanged. The biggest issue, a constant complaint was, I went on to distributor X and the thing I wanted is gone and they have no idea when it's going to be back and they're just telling me to go figure it out. And that's the last thing an office wants to hear when, assistant, whoever is on their lunch break is trying to go buy this stuff. I mean, the biggest thing in the world is that many of the offices don't have a person whose job it is to do this.
What's really interesting, Mike, is I became a source of PPE for people because I have a Facebook group. I connected with some individuals who were providing PPE, and I would literally work out, if I can get this many people to buy, will you give them discounts? So I was like the middle person, which was a very weird place to be in. But trying to get gowns, that we wanted to wear. I mean, sourcing these gowns, trying to get, whether it was disposable gowns or ones you can wash. I mean, it was crazy times. So, it's nice to know, again, you were in the safety space anyway, and you kind of shifted your model because you started to get into the PPE. I'm sure if the pandemic didn't happen, you would not even be into that PPE. It wasn't something that you were even looking at that point, but it really made it better when you needed to shift your business model slightly.
Yeah, not to the point we're at. And oddly enough, I mean, kind of to what Jinesh said, we were primarily focusing on the safe cap, the safety needle. We had demos set up in like 12 different schools and a whole bunch of different large groups to sort of roll out across those groups. And all that came to a screeching halt. So while we still had a product to sell, people were just trying to stay alive. And so, the changing needles was the last thing on their radar. It was really this thing. And oddly enough, the model we developed helps the needle sales as well, because we can, roll this into the subscription platform. We can introduce new things to our clients as we move forward. So it ends up being, a nice thing. And, a lot of what we do can be, assisting for people that, have softwares like what Jinesh does. And we've had conversations offline about, maybe connecting on that. But there's a lot of ways that we can complement other things that are out there.
Great. So Alice, how did your company help practice in the growth effort, obviously after or during the pandemic?
Yeah, similarly, faced a lot of the same challenges that were already mentioned in terms of momentum in our growth and really using that opportunity to refocus on the customer's needs. So as we saw, it was an opportunity to focus on our existing customers and their challenges of the fact that patients weren't coming into the dental practice and spending as much time with the practitioners, with the staff, where they normally would learn about and the staff would educate them about sleep and the importance of sleep. They also had fewer moments to have them do the online screening or the screening form that we had in paper at the time that was a discussion point. So we actually used that, kind of situation to drive what was already on our development plan and bring it in closer and create this fully digital platform. So it drove us to create this direct-to-patient communication system that uses texts that could be sent to patients directly on behalf of the practice. We created a whole content library of educating patients about sleep so that, because they weren't going to be having time in the practice while they were there during the visits to do that. So we created a ton of, great little video snippets and, kind of educating people about sleep. The tie-in with COVID was actually, there was a tie-in because, it's only when you get your deepest part of your sleep cycle that you rebuild your immune system and repair your body. And so, having people's immune system be at their strongest through having good quality sleep was highly important and a very relevant topic. And so we created this fully digital platform. We put everything online so that it could facilitate the screening and diagnosis of the sleep patients without having to burden both the staff and to adapt to their new workflow.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, Alice, for this one, I'm going to go back to you on this one. So what do you think are some of the key themes or trends in 2022 that dentists should pay attention to? And how does your company fit in to serve those key trends?
Yeah. So I'd say, on that, what I just talked about in terms of kind of working with patients remotely is one thing that we're going to continue to see and continue to drive through our remote workflows and digital platform, make it more convenient, make it easier, make it faster. That's one thing we're doing with Sleep Architects and getting the patients quickly through that pre-treatment workflow. especially with staff turnover continuing to be an issue. And the other big thing, I think, is patient affordability for treatments. So, the pandemic has obviously done a lot of dislocation of financial accessibility and ability to afford treatments. And so we have put forward now a national patient financing program that is A through E credit. Everyone's pre-qualified. The deal is accessible to every single patient without having to do a credit check, and so that they can get sleep treatment, life-saving treatment for $199 a month. And we're doing this on behalf of the practices. Every practice has access to it, and every patient has access to it. So we think that, helping practices think about patient affordability in terms of getting their treatment is another big trend for 2022.
Great. That's I love your answer there. So, and I love that I'm a patient financing guy. I love third-party financing, as we talked about. So, I teach a workshop on that. So I'm a big fan of being able to make treatment affordable for patients, because if you can make it affordable, they're going to say yes. Especially in a need of this, which is, sleep issues. Michael, question on to you. What do you think are the key themes and trends in 2022, and how does your company fit into those key trends?
I think one of the key trends, and this has been going on for a while, is the continued growth of the multi-office group. Really, most people that buy a practice or start a practice are not buying one. They're almost always, the goal is to grow to 2, 3, 4 at a minimum. So modifying our model to be primarily applicable for groups, and that's one of the big things we focused on the first 2 months of this year, is to make sure that we can work with parent and child offices, that we've got reporting that an office can, manage from afar, because a big part of what we're doing is buying. So looking at trends, looking at usage, identifying issues, over-ordering, under-ordering, make sure you've got that visibility, across all the offices is a big deal. And I think that's, again, another thing that's lacking, with a lot of the existing systems that are out there for making purchases. So, being really applicable for those multi-office groups.
Great. Jinesh, same question to you. What do you think are some of the key trends in 2022, and how does your company fit into those trends?
Yeah, I think there's 3 big trends that I'm seeing. Michael hit one. I think it's the roll-ups, people who are creating group dental practices and being part of a management organization. Another one I think is just employee hiring and retaining good dental assistants and hygienists, everyone that's just in the office. And I think the third one is just using data to better run your organization. And I think that's probably consistent across multiple industries, but dental, I've seen it a ton. From the DSO or the group practice standpoint, our product really lends itself from a systematic way to create policies and procedures that you can copy and paste and manage equipment across multiple locations remotely. So that's one thing that we're helping out there. The data standpoint, we're giving dentists and these group practices data they'd never seen before, like predictive replacement calculators for equipment, understanding which ones are breaking down more than others and why it might be different at one location versus another. And the last thing, when it comes to employee retainment, I know we all think about hiring, but think about keeping employees. And I think being able to put software like ours into your practice shows that you're trying to help make their lives easier. Instead of running around chasing paper or, reviewing binders of things to see, did we do it? Here's a digital tool that we've invested in you to make your life easier to be in our practice. So I think it's all about investing in the people that you have and keeping them there. And I think our tool shows that that's something that they're doing.
Love that. So I'm going to surprise you with another question here. Look, we all have some competitor in the space. Actually, I'm not sure, Jinesh, you have a competitor per se, but Michael and Alice, you both have competitors, people who sell PPE, other supplies. Alice, there's many companies who offer sleep solutions. So what I want you to do is you don't have to name anybody's names, and that's not what this is about, but how do you differ from any competitors that you may have, and why should a dentist be interested in using your product? Jinesh, you can go first.
Yeah, sure. You're right. At the moment, we don't have any direct competitors in our space. But what we do have is people who are servicing equipment and trying to provide this value whenever they're outfitting practices. We see ourselves as more of a partner to them, saying, here's a front-end interface that tells your clients, here is the best way to manage the equipment you just sold them to protect their investment, and here's a good solution for them. So we're actually trying to work with as many of these partners that could be competitors in the future, but saying just work with us first before you try and build it yourself, because we've done it.
Perfect. Michael, how about you?
So we buy very differently from our competitors, and we allow people to buy differently than our competitors do. I guess the main upshot is that for an office, the prices are a lot lower, and in many cases, they don't have to do anything. So this job they were scrambling to do, again, lunchtime, off hours, I can't tell you how many big groups I find who are like, it's a 10 office group, and the lady's, she's also an assistant, and she's doing this stuff at 8 and 9 p.m. Well, the job is now greatly simplified. So we become her biggest asset in a way that, didn't exist otherwise. So we buy differently, and we allow people to buy differently.
Alice, same question to you.
Yeah. So Sleep Architects, I think we really focus on overcoming the traditional challenges in this dental sleep industry. So what we do very differently than any other company in the industry is that we actually bring patients through case acceptance and treatment in a digital, for treatment for the dental practice in a digital workflow that doesn't require staff time. And through that patient affordability piece that I talked about earlier, really drive case acceptance at a much higher level. So these are completely new and unique kind of business models to be bringing to the dental sleep area.
That's great. So one last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So what I want to find out from all of you guys here is, how can someone get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your product? And if you want to make just like some type of offer or special to the people listening or viewing. So Alice, you take that away. How can people take it first? How can people reach out to you? And do you have any offers you want to throw out to the viewing audience?
Yes, people can certainly go to our website, which is www.sleeparchitects.com, both words spelled out. And they could also contact our email address, which is enroll@sleeparchitects.com, or our phone number, which is 888-777-3198. In terms of our deal, I'd love to offer the listeners here a free month of subscription of Sleep Architects. So to give us a try, and we'd love to work with you.
And obviously, you just mentioned that they heard about you through the podcast. That's important as well.
Yes, we have the code would be Raving, RAVING. And if you just mention that, we'll install that discount.
That's a good code. Raving's perfect. That's the brand. That's good. Michael, how do people contact you, learn more about your product, and do you want to throw out an offer to anybody?
Yeah, we can be found at www.verenasolutions.com. That's VERENA Solutions.com/Verena Plus. And there's a form you can fill out that it's very brief. We'll reach out to you. What we're offering for this podcast is 25% off your first month's order, and we'll eliminate the first 3 months of your subscription fee. So you end up getting a pretty massive discount on at least 1 month worth of all your PPE. And, we eliminate the typical fee that's associated. One last thing I forgot to mention earlier, jumping off what Jinesh said, big part of what we do is a data-driven approach. So similar to Jinesh, we allow patients or customers to use their own data to make better decisions. That typically wasn't the case before.
Perfect. Jinesh, and on to you.
So you can reach us at our website, UptimeHealth.com. That's UPTIME health.com. Or you can give us a call, 857-302-3732. But for anyone who's listening, all you do is that you said you heard us on this podcast. And what we'll do is we'll give you a trial as well as a discount on your subscription. It all depends on the size of your organization. So don't want to say that out loud just in case you hold my feet to the fire for how big you are. But just letting you know, there is definitely a discount. And the more you talk about how much you love Len, maybe the bigger the discount. So that's kind of, I want to see what people come up with there.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, guys, I didn't know what to expect. I've never interviewed 3 different people, but this was an awesome episode. I love the guys, love the way you kind of interacted, and it was really great. So if you're listening or watching and you love this episode, please share it with someone else. Please let them know that there's a different episode now dealing with startup companies. Please reach out to the companies you have interest in finding out. Michael with VERENA Solutions, Jinesh with UptimeHealth, and Alice with Sleep Architects. They gave you the contact information. They told you the website. Make sure you reference the podcast or the word raving to or talk great about me like Jinesh wants. So please do that. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Review us, like us, recommend us. Remember, we come out Fridays at 5 a.m. in the morning now, and provide me with your feedback. So as we end this episode, as I always say, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Len.
Thank you very much, Len.